Mama Watali presents Strong Women, Strong Men series. Today's topic, Tying It All Together, Tools for Change. Let's discuss mandatory policies and practice and how to protect women and their families. Panelist, Zena Chaudhry, Chief Executive Officer, Sakina Holmes, Reverend Cheryle R.C. Hanna, Minister of the Congregation at 4th Avenue Baptist Church, Nicolette Vardon, Chairperson, Colors of Mama Ottawa, Moderator, Sandy Onyalo, Executive Director, Ujingo GCI. Mama Watali is an Ottawa-based non-profit organization with an international reach.
Mama Watali means in the absence of a mother, and it comes from the Bantu language of Luganda. And it was born after my mom passed away. Now, the organization is really at the core to serve Black women that have suffered personal loss, whether it is through loss of a loved one, but most especially because of domestic or what is sometimes referred to as intimate partner violence. When women go through violence of any kind, women just need somewhere to turn and talk to somebody, either in search of resources or just somebody to listen and validate what they're going through as they try to recover and rebuild their lives.
Mama Watali was founded to support survivors of gender-based violence and to create awareness of the challenges women continue to face.
We are doing advocacy work at all levels of government, from municipal, provincial to national level, because women's rights essentially are human rights. And at the core of the human rights is the equality of both men and women.
Founded by Susan Namulindwa, Mama Watali has successfully undertaken several projects nationally and internationally, including the creation of a library in Uganda.
When I was a little girl, I loved to read. I remember being in a boarding school and splitting novels with my friends so that we could read. So I used this opportunity of being in Ottawa to collect books from my children's school boards, and with the help of lottery and volunteers, we transported those books to Luero and set up a community library. We were able to distribute books to neighboring schools so that they could use them to elevate the education in the area. We have also done community microcredits for women in Luero still and in Uganda in general. And we also were able to get school fees for girls. These are girls that will be high achievers for secondary school who would not have gone to school otherwise. So those are some of the things we have done in the past. Right now, our target market is right here in Canada mostly. Black women, new immigrant women that have been affected by domestic violence, intimate partner violence, or any kind of loss. So we are setting up community support circles. So we are encouraging women to get in touch and find just some either professional help or women that have also gone through what you're going through to support you. Sometimes it's just a shoulder to lean on, or somebody to say, you know what, I've made it. If I made it, you can make it. So we are really trying not to talk about being victims. We are talking about overcoming.
The vision of Mama Watali is to give voice to the lives of Black women in all its dimensions.
Well, most of us have seen or witnessed a situation that we know is wrong. We know somebody who is going through some kind of abuse, some woman who needs intervention, but sometimes we don't know how to do it. So we want to put volunteer resources together so that people know how they can help in a way that is helpful for the family and helpful for the woman or the women that are going through it, so they can move forward with their children. We are putting together resources for parenting. How do you parent? How do we parent boys and girls to make sure that the boys know that they don't have to be abusive? This is not a power struggle, that they can have healthy relationships. We need to emphasize the fact that when a girl or a woman says no, that no means no. And there is no reason why, as a society or as a community, we should turn around and blame the victims after they have been abused. So currently we are holding a series of conversations. So these are weekly conversations around issues that affect women. I want to call strong men out there, strong women out there, but especially strong men. This work is not about women versus men. We need to hear the male voices. There is a lot of good, strong men out there that fight day and night for their families, that go out every day to protect their families. We need to hear your voices. We need to hear you add your voices to this work, because, the family is the core foundation of our community. So if we have broken families, we are going to have a broken community. So a family is the nucleus of the community. So if we build strong families, we will build a strong community. Jump in and let us do this work together.
That was a beautiful video that explains the work of Mama Watili. I'd like to welcome all of you to the final installation of a series of panel discussions under the Strong Men, Strong Women series. This particular panel discussion this afternoon is called Tying It All Together, Tools for Change. My name is Sandy Onyalo, and I'm going to be the moderator for this afternoon. I'm the executive director of Ujengo Global Community. Ujengo Global Community is an international NGO that works with communities of African descent, both in the global South and the global North. Now, I would like to invite Talisa Singh McKay. She's the communications coordinator and research assistant with Mama Watili to give our land acknowledgement.
We gather this afternoon on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe nations. We acknowledge that they lived here before us and keep living here now. Reconnaître le terrain sur lequel nous vivons est une invitation pour nous reconnaître l'histoire de la terre, des gens et de la connectivité, pour donner un sens à ces connexions. By learning where we live, we honor the cultures and practices of the people of this land and continue to be aware of and participate in the healing process of colonization and intergenerational trauma. As a woman born in this country to immigrant parents, myself and my family are guests. Je vous appelle à reconnaître que vous êtes également des invités et des gardiens aussi. As an organization that advocates for the support of Black women and families who experience personal loss, all forms of intimate and gender violence, and harassment through a historically patriarchal and racist system, we recognize the mirrored hardships faced by Indigenous people. Nous reconnaissons comme des personnes de couleur également opprimées que les ancêtres des peuples autochtones ont été dépossédés, se sont fait arracher leurs enfants et leur couture a été dépouillé. Que les esprits de votre peuple apportent la force d'avancer tout au long du chemin vers l'émancipation. May the spirits of your people bring forth the strength to move forward throughout the journey to emancipation. The patriarchal systems in place have damaged all of us, our families, friends, and our personal environment. Nous nous voyons à travers les yeux. Nous nous embrassons et nous agissons. Nous ne sommes pas des spectateurs. We are not bystanders. As we celebrate the UN decade for people of African descent, let us remember our ancestors, those who were enslaved, the mothers and their children who were raped and continued to be sold into slavery. May their spirits give us strength to uplift their voices as we continue their journey to freedom and equity. Alors que nous célébrons la décennie des Nations Unies pour les personnes d'ascendance africaine, Souvenons-nous de nos ancêtres, de ceux qui ont été réduits en esclavage, des mères et de leurs enfants qui ont été violés et ont continué d'être vendus comme des esclaves. Puis, leur esprit nous donnait la force de lever nos voix alors que nous poursuivons leur chemin de la liberté et l'équité. Thank you, et vous, je remercie.
Now I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists for this afternoon. Zena Chaudhry. She serves as the executive officer of Sakina Homes, a sheltering project for Muslim women and children across Canada. After obtaining her Master's of Law degree in International Human Rights Law, Zena delved into social service sector to address the vast needs that were close to home. Sakina Homes supports thousands of women and children going through traumatic experiences stemming from abuse, immigration issues, homelessness, and poverty. Welcome, Zena. Our next panelist is Reverend Cheryle Renee Chapman Hanna. Reverend Cheryle has over 20 years of experience preaching to Baptist, Lutheran, and Presbyterian congregations. Her ministry objective is to serve the people of God as a servant leader, a people who are culturally, economic, and socially diverse, and to serve God's people in a place that welcomes and honors persons of every gender, race, national origin, and family status as representative of God's kingdom to come. Our next panelist is Nicolette Vardon. She is a recent IR political science graduate and current paralegal student. She is a full-time mom of a very busy 13-month-old, so I can imagine how busy she is while she's doing her other duties. And she's also chairperson for the local organization called Colors of Mama Ottawa. She has previously worked with the Afro-Caribbean Mentorship Program, the upcoming Together Conference on Youth Homelessness, and the Ottawa Winter Clothing Drive for Homelessness, in collaboration with Hit the Streets Ottawa and Ottawa Street Medics. Just to give you a bit of an overview of the work that's led up today, the purpose of this particular panel, as we've said, is sort of tying it all together. Previous panel discussions have reviewed a number of items that, of course, themes of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence in our communities, the role of genders and our socialization. We've had a professor giving us a snapshot through a research lens of the issues in our communities based on violence against women. And as you'll hear a little bit later from Zena, we've had a really successful example of a shelter project that includes services for women and their children. And also some discussion about government's commitment to ending gender-based violence. And we'll talk about that a bit later as we go through the questions. So I'll ask each of the panelists to respond to a number of questions. The first question is, what are some of the issues and challenges you face in your work or your studies in protecting women and families from gender-based violence? Nicola, would you like to go first?
First of all, thank you, Mama Watali, for having me again on this webinar. Actually, not so much. I personally haven't worked among women that have been affected by gender-based violence, in particular as a group. However, in my work in the mom community within Ottawa and also within the ACB community, I have noticed that when it comes to parenting and when it comes to within our community in general, the conversation is not very open. It's not a conversation that we do have a lot within the racialized community or the ACB community, which is why this panel and this entire discussion and series is so amazing. And also, I find that racialized women in particular, ACB women in particular, do not have as much access to the resources that they need in order to recover from these experiences, which is the work I do with Colors of Mama, or Como, if you will. We really try to help bring resources to our community. And yeah, I think that a lot of women, that whether it's intimate partner violence or just divorce in general, a lot of women, single women, experience a lack of resources and support from their community. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've experienced within my own work.
Thank you. That was very enlightening. Reverend Cheryle, could we get your thoughts on the major issues and challenges that you face in your work protecting women and families from gender-based violence?
I want to start by saying that when I came to this, the big thing that I thought about comes from our first conversation on the dichotomy of violence and faith. So from the faith community, one of my colleagues in that was Salima Versi, and she made a statement that encapsulates exactly our reality for women when it comes to faith. Patriarchy is the water we live in. Patriarchy is the water we live in. And so from the perspective of faith, the reality is that we have to acknowledge that this is true. Stop pretending that it's not. It really is true that patriarchy is the water we live in. And so once we can acknowledge that, then we can start to begin to talk about the effects that participation, the effects that living in patriarchy has on violence in women, particularly as it relates to faith. So we continue to question in the faith community the role of women in leadership. It does Islam, Christianity, Judaism. We're all still under this, well, are you really called to do this? Are you legitimate? And so that's the biggest obstacle. In fact, that is the obstacle, that at the core of who we are as people of faith, we have not accepted women as equals. So until we first just say out loud, and women have to say this out loud too, that we're living in a patriarchal reality and our faith lives in that with us. It's not separate. It is a part of our position in faith. It is not what the divine intended. It is not what the divine intended, but it is where we are right now. And so since it is where we are right now, it is the challenge, is separating patriarchy and its effects and our interpretations and the way we live, separating patriarchy from what the divine intended in our creation and our faith.
Thank you for that. Patriarchy is the water we live in. I think we should note that. That's the first time I've heard it put that way. So it's very interesting. Thank you. Zena, are you there?
I am, yes.
Yes. Coming from the shelter movement, what do you see in your work in terms of the issues and challenges in protecting women and families from gender-based violence?
Yeah, of course. First, I just want to say I'm so deeply grateful to be here amongst all of you, and to be on a panel with such amazing women. And thank you so much for having me. Honestly, it's a huge honor for me. I think what we see, I think the two biggest things I would say it's twofold. So one is with the communities that we deal with, racialized women, immigrant women, stigma is still a huge issue. With them either coming forward to get resources, even know what their rights are, and even learn about what's out there. And so I think stigma and a lack of education is a big one, and not only on part of the women who need the help, but also on the community and on their parents and on their siblings and on all of us. And I think the second one is a lack of sensitive resources. So culturally sensitive resources, there's a huge lack of it. And definitely racialized women feel those effects in mainstream shelters. Different religious shelters treat other women from other religions very differently. And so when Sakina Homes was created, it was created from an Islamic lens, but with the knowledge that we will help any woman who comes to us. And we need to be prepared, and we need to make sure that we are giving religiously and culturally sensitive services to all those women and children who do come to us. So I think definitely the lack of resources that are out there that are available to these women is a huge a boundary that they're unable to cross to get that help.
I completely agree with you. And stigma and shame continue to be a burden for women, and it should not be a burden for women. And definitely, I agree, a cultural competency. We need to really do a lot of work in making sure that services for women are culturally competent. So thank you for that. Let's move on to the next question. Let's start with Reverend Cheryle. What suggestions do you have to strengthen and or improve both the shelter system and other systems and services to make them more culturally appropriate, as Zena has mentioned, for women and their families?
So again, it's about tools for change, right? We have to think change. The status quo is not working. Hello, the status quo is not working. Violence towards women is increasing. It is not decreasing. And so first, we have to think theologically. In our conversation about the divine, it would be really helpful if we could make a distinction between the divine and the human, which we do not. In other words, the divine is different, the divine is distinct, and the divine is above human in every way, right? The divine is not man or male. The divine is the divine. And I think it's the way we bring those two together. We flap male and divine together. We feed it to our children from birth. And we're saying, every time we talk about the divine, we say he. So there's this power and without education, right? So we're not unpacking it in a way. We're just like, well, when we say he, we mean God. No, that's not obvious. That's not obvious. So if you mean God, say God. If you mean God, say God. Don't say he. And so, and unpack our religious texts with a little more sensitivity to the fact that he is not a universal statement of humankind. There are, of course, in the Christian and Hebrew text, the beginning says that God created male and female, God created them. So in God's image, it wasn't God made he and that's it. It was both. And so beginning to talk theologically and just unpack the divine and give the divine really the prominence that the divine deserves, and rightly place humankind this way, male and female. What we tend to do in our conversation is go the divine, men, women, which is really not helpful. And then the other thing that I think would really be helpful, if we could begin to at least have conversations about our practice of the male pronouns. If you listen to our music, if you listen to our liturgies, you listen to our prayers, we say he 80% more than we say the name for the divine. And we think, oh, everybody's okay with that, except the people who aren't. Those who have been abused, those who have been mistreated by the he in their lives, all of a sudden, God is he. And then that's not helpful. So the faith that they need so that they can continue, the faith that God wants to give is not available. So if we mean God, say God, say Allah, say Jehovah, say Muhammad, say Jesus. Don't say he. And it sounds horrible. I know there's women of faith listening to this and saying, oh my goodness, she's crushing everything I've ever, all my life I say he. I'm not asking you to give it up. I'm asking you to think about it. And think about the way in which our use of male pronoun can be damaging for our sisters, right? Just think about it. And when I say that, I think of my Methodist brothers and sisters who would say they don't drink. And they don't drink, not because they think that drinking is a sin, not because they think drinking is against God, against the divine. They don't drink because they're worried that their brother or their sister who's beside them would not be strong enough to withstand the effects of alcohol. So when I say consider giving up the male pronoun, he, him, her, it's not because it's not an argument. It's a conciliation for women who are being affected by the way there are some men who think, oh, I'm he, so therefore I'm like the divine. So I think those are two really great steps that we can take. As Christians, we would say God is spirit, and they who worship God must do so in spirit and in truth. I think those would be great beginning steps to take.
That's really nice to hear that, because what you're actually suggesting is that we deconstruct some of that thinking that we've grown up with, whether, me as a Christian, there are many taken for granted, and we haven't deconstructed that. The way we deconstruct other things like violence and gender identity and gender-based violence. So I'd like that perspective that you're really inviting us to sort of, put a different lens on it and look at it quite differently. So thank you for that. Nicolette, the question is, what suggestions do you have to strengthen and or improve the shelter system and other systems and services to make them more culturally appropriate for women and their families?
Thank you. I think that in general, within the Ottawa community, having only been in the Ottawa community for almost 5 years now, finding your cultural ties, your community ties can be difficult for racialized women, for racialized people in general within the Ottawa community. So I think making our community that we are all creating with these organizations such as Mama Watali, making them more known and, reaching out to the shelters, reaching out to women in different ways, whether it's through media, whether it's like through other organizations and collaborations. I think just really making these resources accessible for women is so important, and letting them know that they're not alone. Like, we have this community. Whether you come to Ottawa or you've been here a long time and you can't find that community. I know when I came here as, a 17-year-old, it was hard to find my community, and it was really difficult feeling left out visibly within the Ottawa community. And just making those resources very accessible and having discussions like this, more discussions like this. And also, I think another huge thing would be just having events and other discussions that are lighthearted in a way where we can step out of these dark conversations sometimes that can be tough when you're a racialized person, when you're always talking about the trauma. Sometimes we need to take a step back from the trauma and have lighthearted conversations and really foster our community more.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying, because when you're a victim or a survivor of violence, the loneliness is very apparent, and reaching out to women, both the stigma, the shame, the loneliness can really impact how that woman rebuilds her life, or the length of time that it takes to build her life. And I like that what you're saying about the light moments. When we've worked in areas of trauma for so long, we do create light moments because you have to, right?
Yeah,
to be able to survive the work. Yeah, so thank you for that.
I found it very useful, especially among mothers, having those light moments, like with my organization, we do little Zoom nights where it's just a free open conversation, but things like that are really important for women, especially to have that support, to create connections, and not even personal connections. Maybe it's business connections, learning from each other, knowledge sharing. There's so much that our community has to offer, and we can do so much for one another when we support each other that way.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. Well, Zena, you've worked in the shelter movement for quite a while, and I'm sure you have some thoughts about how services could be more culturally appropriate for women and their families. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's basically what we do, right? That's why Sakine Homes was even founded. But I think one of the biggest things that we have found helpful, and one of the biggest things that I think prepare us for helping the women and children that come to us, is bringing the survivors to the table and letting them tell us what has worked, what has not worked, what is still yet to be done, and how to go about doing it. We have, from the start of a woman coming into our program or into one of our homes, we let her give us feedback from every single day that she's there. From the first day she arrives, throughout every single day of her stay, in the days she leaves, and even afterwards. And it's completely anonymous. They don't have to feel like, they have to share who they are. And this has allowed us to grow. Several of the services that we offer today were not offered when we first started. Things like reconciliation, things like legal services, life skills. And this has all come from feedback that residents have given us saying, this would be very, very helpful for us. And that's why we've gone ahead, made those policies, procedures, and implemented those programs, because nobody's going to tell us how to do a better job of helping people with cultural competence than those who have gone through the system, those who have been failed by the system, and those who have been able to stand up on their own feet afterwards as well.
Yeah, that's really important. I think sometimes when we talk about cultural competency, we sort of draw a blank, how do we do that? But you're right. We need to hear from the women themselves, because they know, right? As victims and survivors, they know what they need. So it's very important that, yes, we do hear from them. Thank you for that.
Sandy, if I could just jump in to respond.
Sure, go ahead.
I just thinking about patriarchy on a global scale and listening to you speak about how you administer your organization. I think it just reminds me of the way that a lot of international organizations are run when they're applied to the global south, where a lot of them operate. One of the largest complaints or one of the largest issues that there is when organizations are operating internationally in the global south is that they don't listen from the ground up. They don't listen to the people that they're trying to help. And that's the biggest problem. And when we think about patriarchy on a global scale and, seeing countries in the global south as weaker and more feminine, it applies in shocking ways also. So I think that's amazing that you guys are, really listening to the women in Ottawa.
Thank you for that. And this tension between the North and South, particularly in light of the current activities around anti-racism and violence, is really prominent right now. And the international community is really questioning themselves in terms of the power dynamics. So that's a very interesting point that you're raising. So we'll move on to the next question. As we said, the theme for this panel discussion is tools for change. So the next question is, what tools, methodologies, policies, or practices should be mandatory or incorporated in our day-to-day working lives, in our day-to-day lives, to end gender-based violence? How about we start with you, Zena?
Day-to-day, I think there's a few things. And I do want to touch on one thing that happened previously. When we were watching that video at the very beginning, and the founder of Onyalo was talking about their proactive services, of teaching boys that violence is not the answer, it is not what makes you masculine. I think being proactive and having those things in our day-to-day lives is so important, more than we realize. Right now, unfortunately, with us working on the front line, majority of our work is reactive.
Yeah.
We get dozens of calls every hour of help for various things, but our goal should also be, as much work that we're putting into being reactive and providing these services, we should be proactive in our day-to-day lives, rewording how things are being presented, talking about emotional stability and, emotions in boys and how it's okay to have emotions. And there's nothing like this is girly, or this is like, too masculine for you, or this is not masculine enough for you. I think definitely changing from the ground up. Like, there's so much that's embedded in our day-to-day lives. The language, the Reverend was talking about the language that we use. Like, there's so much, even when we have, our national anthem growing up, there was sons, right? And I remember someone in grade 6 or 7 said something, and the teacher was like, well, that's how it is. That's how it's always been. And that's it. Like, you just stand up and you be quiet for that like minute and a half, and that's it. So I think definitely, and allowing us to question things. I think that's the biggest thing. There's so many power structures in place, and people feel like if they question something, they'll get fired. No one's going to invite them out again. People won't want to have them at dinner parties. Like, I'm the worst to have at dinner parties now. Like, people don't like inviting me. My aunts are like, "Oh, you're coming?" Because I will sit there and I'll say, like, no, abuse is real, happens in every community. Like, you can't say that's not happening here. But you don't know. I was like, it could be happening to someone in our own family, and you would never know if you don't make them comfortable enough to speak out. So I think day to day, there's so much we have to change. And really, first of all, take apart, look at every piece, and then start putting it back together. So, but I mean, we all start from home, right? That's the biggest thing. You start from home. You start with your sons and daughters, your father and your mother, your niece, your nephew, whoever it is. And I think that is going to be what gets us to a place where, instead of us opening new shelters, we're able to get to that point where we're like, we're so happy that we can shut our location in London down. We're so happy we can shut our location in Ottawa down, because we've done such a good job of being proactive that community knows how to get these resources. They have the education, they have the knowledge of their rights, and we don't need this reactive service. And that, like, I always say, like, my goal in life is that in 20 years, I put myself out of a job. Like, that is my goal. I will find something else to do, but like, that is our goal, and that should be our goal, to dismantle these systems from the ground up, from the inside out, so that we don't have to put more people through what the women today have gone through and the kids today have gone through. More people should not be going through that anymore.
Thank you. I completely agree with you when you talk about the role of men and boys. I've said this, many people have heard this from me, because I'm always talking about it. And I like that Mama Watali talks about strong men and strong women. I've always believed that if you don't look at the behaviors and attitudes of men and boys, you're never going to dismantle violence against women, and in a respectful way. And it's the way that men and boys are raised. Sometimes they're victims of their own socialization, as we say, because of what their parents or their families define as masculine. And I like that you're saying that, you know, masculinity comes in different shapes and different shades. And I agree what you're saying about the, because what came to mind when you're talking about dinner parties, you take risks, right? And sometimes when you know you're on the right path, you take the risk and you feel better for it, rather than staying silent and knowing that you should have spoken up. So thank you for that. Nicolette, what tools, methodologies, practices, and policies should be mandatory or incorporated in our work to end gender-based violence?
I'm gonna have to piggyback on my friend Zena. I really do believe that it starts at home. It really does. And being Pakistani and Guyanese, there's a lot of sentiments that as a young person, when you grew up with, and then you're faced with the community that we're faced with now, where things are changing slowly but surely, but addressing them at home and with your parents, with the older generation, is the key. It's the most important thing. And when it comes to toxic masculinity, especially among young Black men, it's, as a mom of a little Black boy, I think that it's so important to start them young. It's okay to be caring. It's okay to have feelings, and you don't have to be big and strong and tough all the time. And in our community, it's always constructed that way, especially in the racialized community, that, you know, you have to be this way. And then, and we're also faced with so many different challenges, and you feel like you have to be that way. And I really do believe it does start at home. And as an individual, it's that works to combat these things. It's not just the people that are heading the organizations. It's not just our community leaders. It's every single person. It's the people that come to our events, people that are, you know, watching these webinars. And the conversation starts with everyone. It's not just our community leaders, and it's not just doing it alone. It does start at home, and it's from the ground up, right?
Yeah, that's great. We all have a responsibility as mothers, fathers, grandparents. We all have a responsibility to keep talking and keep having these conversations. Thank you for that. Reverend Cheryle, what are your thoughts in terms of the tools, methodologies, practices, and policies that should be mandatory incorporated to end gender-based violence?
Of course, everything that's been said is true, but if we're going to talk about policies and practices, we can't mandate what happens in people's homes. Where we can and could have some effect is in the education and training of people that are going to handle. So the education and training of teachers, that it should include gender conversations, right? It should include why are you calling on the boys 60% more than you're calling on the girls? Why are you assuming that the girls can't play these particular sports? Why? So teachers, when I was in seminary, they were in the Princeton Theological Seminary was in a phase where they were really working on gender issues. And we walked in the door and they said, you cannot use a personal pronoun for God. If you say God, you mean God. And it was, everybody was screaming, oh, you're stepping on my toes. You're making, this is horrible. You can't do this. All except the Koreans. The Koreans were like, well, what is wrong with y'all? What's the big deal? Our language doesn't have personal pronouns. When we want to refer to Zena, we say Zena. When we want to refer to Talisa, we say Talisa. When we want to refer to Charles, we say Charles. They were saying there's no, and when we're talking about God, we say God. So it is not required. It is a part of Western culture that we have all, we're drinking this Kool-Aid. We're drinking the Western Kool-Aid that has been passed down to us. And without giving it thought, without deconstructing, is it really important that we follow Zena, she? We don't need to say Zena, she. Say Zena is in charge of a shelter that is addressing a certain population. And whether Zena is male or female really is inconsequential. It is the work that Zena is doing. So I think educating those people who are training our young people is going to have to be a part of it. It is called deconstructing this whole thing and giving it some thought. There's conservatives that would say that we're canceling. We're not canceling anything. We're making space for people who have not made space. Particularly when we look at the Christian text, the interpretation of Christian text just completely ignores the fact that they're women from the beginning to the end. The interpretation and preaching of Christian texts ignores the text of violence against women, or glosses over them in some way that, well, it was okay. No, we have to look at the text. We have to preach the text correctly. We have to respect the violence that is being demonstrated there, and understand that it was written by men, for men, about men. But because of the divine and the gracious power of the divine, women are in the story and you can't get us out of there. You can't get rid of women in the story. They're in the story all the time, even though you don't like it, even though you try to gloss over it. So I think training and insisting, making policies that within our faith communities, that we're training leaders to correctly give some thought to how what we say is being heard by the people in our congregations, in the people in our mosques, in the people in our synagogues, so that they're not empowered and emboldened. I'm the head of the household and that means I can do whatever I want. No, right? So it's about training. It's about going back to education. We've kind of moved in this society, this postmodern world that's anti-education. At this specific time, that education would make all the difference. Education, all the studies show the higher education, the less you have some of these issues, because the women, not that the men aren't going to still try to beat their behinds, but that the women understand that this is not what they have to be subjected to when they're educated. So there's a lot to be done, right? And I'm glad to see Zena and Nicolette, the young women, because I'm at the end of this journey, right? I've taken the bruises and the hits on the back, and I don't have as much influence left. So it's important for you to hear that you've got lots of work to do. I hope you're not still doing the work when you're my age. I hope the work is lessened, but also that everything we do for each generation really is making a difference. It really does make a difference to say to boys, you can cry. It really does make a difference to say to a girl that you can be an astronaut if you want to, or a firefighter. Our culture is going to reverse a lot of what we say, but keep at it. Every little bit helps. And education is going to make all the difference.
Reverend Cheryle, I have a question, a follow-up question for you, because the text has been written in many different languages and genres, I guess you can say. Do you think that the much of the current texts that we study should be rewritten to reflect our thinking of today?
Okay, the truth is we don't have to. We don't have to. We have to acknowledge, like the Hebrew text is full of feminine. That's for one. The Holy Spirit is a she. The pronoun in Hebrew is she. But when the Greeks rewrote the story, right? The New Testament is in Greek. They took wisdom, which is divine wisdom that had the feminine pronoun, and they turned it into logos, which is a male pronoun. So just saying that out loud is liberating. Like, wait. No, this was language that made that distinction, not God. God didn't say, because wisdom cried in the streets, right? When you look at the Hebrew text, the female, the feminine pronoun is everywhere, right? So you don't have to. The other thing, even with the Christian text, is if you look closely, take the Gospel of Luke. There's a story about a man. The next story is about a woman. There's a story about a man. The next story is about a woman. But if you separate and only tell the stories of the men, well, it looks like women aren't there. So the education to understand that if you're reading the text, keep reading. The very next story is about a woman. That there is this balance, even though it was written by men, for men, about men, because of the divine. God made sure that it is egalitarian, that it is available to all, that it's about all, right? It is when we cherry pick the text, right? We cherry pick and take out the pieces we want and leave out the right? Men will say all the time, I can beat my wife because of Ephesians. Yeah, well, see, that's not the way it goes. You passed by what you were supposed to do, your obligation to God, your obligation to the community, and you went all the way down there and found that little text that says women have to be obedient to their husbands, forgetting that the text's main objective, since it was written for men, by men, and about men, is that you, as the husband, are supposed to be obedient to God. You are supposed to be subject to God, and you're supposed to love the flesh on that woman like yourself and be willing to die for her. We skip over that, right? We just go, oh, that's not it, right? So if you correctly read the Ephesians text, it's going to say to you that instead of beating your wife, you'll take a bullet for her. You'll die for her. That her skin is so much more valuable than yours. It's cherished and precious. Now, I guarantee you, if we take a poll of everyone listening and everyone watching, that you have never heard that before. Because it's just not taught, right? And that's the patriarchy of our system of faith, right? That men are supporting their own power. They're not supporting God's power. I mean, God gets in there, sure. We don't skip God, but we manage to hold just a little bit of that power for ourselves, right? And when you step out, as Zena has said, you're no longer welcome at the barbecue, right? Who wants her at the barbecue saying that I'm not the head of my household, that God's the head of my household? Wait, whoa. We don't want to hear that. But unfortunately, you can't shut me up. I'm too old, right? So this is the story. This is the song, right? And we don't have to change the text, but we can say out loud how it was written, why it was written, and point out the human frailty, because it wasn't dictated by God, right? It was written by humans who are frail and broken just like us, right? And so we have to look beyond the text to what the divine has to say to us.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So the next question is, what do you see as the role of governments? And I'm using plural governments because we interface with different levels of government doing this work. What do you see the role of governments in ending gender-based violence?
Governments could end this. One, by prosecution. Just prosecute the criminals that they have become. Don't make me use unworthy language. Prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. Stop winking and smacking and, oh, well, boys will be boys, locker room. That's a bunch of garbage. Prosecute them. You make the laws and then stick to the laws that you've made. It's not acceptable, right? It's not acceptable. Train the police.
Mm-hmm.
Train the police that this is not acceptable, right? You go in the house, you've gotten the call, take the woman out. Don't say, are you all right, baby? What's she supposed to say? The man is standing right there. What's she supposed to say? Take her out. If you get a call, take her out. Take her out, take her somewhere safe, then have a conversation with her, right? And then once you prosecute, then the judges have to give appropriate sentences. I cried weeks after that boy who raped the girl and the two men found her in the garbage. He was still in her in the garbage dump, right? And they because the men pulled the man off, he was prosecuted, he was convicted, and then the judge said, oh, he's a swimmer. It's going to ruin his career. It's going to stigmatize him. Oh, let's give him 6 months. What? Excuse me? See, that's what continues this, because every man watched that and go, well, So all the work we're doing to train our boys, all this work we're doing to talk about gender-based violence and to educate women is all gone when someone gets away with it. And we put them large and huge on TV as if they're a hero, right? We're trying to cancel masculinity. No, we're trying to cancel toxic masculinity. Because there's nothing loving and wonderful. There's nothing sexy about a man who slaps you first, right? There's nothing sexy about that, unless there's a new definition of sex. You young people, help me out here. I don't remember that was sexy. This whole slap you and beat you thing. No. That doesn't do anything for me, right? And I don't think it should do anything for anyone, right? So the government has a role. The government has a role to protect its most vulnerable citizens. And right now, the government's most vulnerable systems are women of color and immigrants. That's who their most vulnerable citizens are. And if the government is not going to protect us, then who will? Right? So there is a role. And yes, I do have a Bible study in about 30 minutes. So I'm going to try to hold on, but I need to, kind of change gears. But this has been an incredible conversation. I am so grateful to be a part of it. You do not know how it makes my heart sing to see Nicolette and the work you're doing with moms, and Zena and the work you're doing with shelters. It just makes my old eyes happy that you're picking up the bloodstained banner and carrying it. And just know that I will be continuing to pray for the work of Mama Matali, that this work gets larger, that there are more grants and that there's more funding. And if I'm open and I'm available in Clearview, Facebook and Instagram, 4th Avenue Baptist Church. If there's anything that you think that I can do to support the work that you're doing individually or corporately, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm here for you as much as I can be. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reverend. Those are very inspiring words. Yes, all of you said resonates with me in terms of the work I've done in gender-based violence, and a lot of work needs to be done in the criminal justice system and how they view women and not re-traumatizing women in the process. So thank you for that. Nicolette, what are your thoughts on what role do you see governments have to play? Governments at all levels, municipal, provincial, federal, territorial, governments have to play in ending violence against women?
First of all, thank you, Reverend Cheryle, for your lovely words and just your thoughts and all the work that you do. Also, to answer you, Sandy, I think most importantly, we have to look at the fact that a lot of what our government does or says when it comes to women, a lot of the time can be buzzwords. And sometimes they can be empty. I mean, currently Canada is supposed to be following, a feminist lens when it comes to a lot of its international policies. And concretely, I personally haven't seen much avail to that, especially when it comes to violence against women. Like I think, I don't remember who said it, but violence against women is increasing on a global scale within Canada as well. So I think for the government at every level to improve what it's doing for women and for women of color is to, actually listen to the women and involve more local organizations, involve them in their policy making processes, not just slightly consult them, not just offer grants, but to incorporate them in formulating these policies at every level, at every stage, because I think that's the biggest thing that we can do. Because if we're not listening to the women that these policies are going to affect, then we're not doing much. And by just throwing out feminism and throwing out, we're going to help violence against women, we're going to support women, that's not going to do anything, because words are just words, right? I think concrete action and informing these policies with the appropriate theory as well, and understanding feminist theory is extremely important as well, because like we all established, this country is based and our world is based in a patriarchal and hierarchical manner. So combating that with the appropriate theory and then consulting our local organizations and local women is the biggest way that we can combat violence against women.
Thank you for that. Canada is very good at consulting groups and groups and groups of people, and you sort of wonder, okay, what happens next? And sometimes you never know what happens next because you don't hear back from them in terms of your thoughts, your experience, your expertise, what that means to the government, how they're going to make change. So I like that you've mentioned consultation. And yes, we have a government governments that are very good at saying the right words, but what is the meaning behind those words? Are we actually analyzing the meaning behind those words? So thank you for that.
And I think another big thing when it comes to looking at Canada specifically, Canada kind of has a reputation at being like great for representing human rights and great at combating human rights. And sometimes we need to, look at this ego and take it down a notch and say, okay, what are we actually doing? What do we need to do for our country and for our people, for our citizens? So, yeah,
most definitely. I want to remind everybody to put your questions. If you have questions for the panelists, please feel free to put them in the Q&A as we continue. Now, Zena, I know that you've had a lot of interface with different levels of government. And what are your thoughts on the role that governments have to play in ending violence against women?
So I'll start from the federal level. Just like the Reverend mentioned, prosecution, and who are our laws being written by? Is there proper representation there? No, not really. Where are the racialized women? Where are racialized men? Where are women of color or even white women? In terms of the ratio that you look at, where are the females here? Where are the women? Where are the racialized people? Where are the people who are affected by this? I don't see them at the table writing the laws. But I think another level of it is, yes, prosecution is a big thing. If a case is there, how do you prosecute it? The sentencing that's given from top to bottom, what happens? I think that really dictates for women as well. Like, am I going to, because look at this case that happened, and on like the face of it, on the surface of it, that case looks like, a lot worse than mine. Where are women going to go when they have emotional abuse, psychological abuse? They're going to say, well, I don't have a mark on me. No one's going to believe me. Nothing's going to happen. So why make it worse for me? So it's a difference between living in this situation, abusive situation, or going somewhere and you have no idea what's going to happen. And one of our residents put it so aptly for me, and she's like, so many times for us, it's choosing between the devil that you know and the devil that you don't know. And she's like, when you have kids, you will always choose the devil that you know. Always, without a doubt, you will choose the devil that you know, because you do not want to put your kids in a place where you are so uncertain, they are uncertain, and there's nothing for them. And then when I look at our provincial, regional, and municipal governments, I look at what differences can they make? Well, how can they allocate their funding to ensure that people who are in need are getting the proper funding? When a woman leaves, majority of the time that she doesn't leave is because she doesn't know how to get childcare. She doesn't know when she will ever find an affordable apartment. Even in Ottawa now, I think the GTA prices have, we've kind of waved them on to you guys as well. And so in that situation, when you look at it and you look at the region of Peel, you look at the region of Toronto, and our subsidized house waiting lists are 8 to 10 years. When women know this, they're going to be like, okay, well, I can't live in a shelter for the rest of my life, for 8 to 10 years with my kids. I can't bounce from home to home. I can only stay in families' homes for so long. What am I going to do? So all of this really plays a role in when people decide to leave. And when they don't decide to leave because there aren't resources out there for them, they obviously face more gender-based violence. And they remain in abusive situations for the sole reason that financially the government hasn't supported survivors, and they haven't seen that support. And so for them, they're saying, she didn't get it. I probably won't get it either, so I'm not going to leave. So I think on a whole, maybe grants for organizations aren't the biggest answer. Obviously, they help a lot, but definitely funding for those who go through it. The survivors, they need the funding in different ways. Childcare is so expensive. I'm sure in Ottawa it's very expensive. In the GTA, it's almost unaffordable. Even for people who work corporate jobs, it's very unaffordable. So subsidizing that, ensuring that there's long-term housing, whatever it takes to ensure that women don't ever state that the reason I didn't leave is because of finances. When someone says that to me, it absolutely destroys me, because there's so much out here. So many people are ready to give. I can tell you an example from Sakina Homes. When we first started out and we had just one apartment that we were using as a transitional apartment for a family, we put a call out and we said, this child has outgrown the crib. Since they moved in, we need a bed, and we don't have enough funds in the reserve to buy a bed. And I put this on my personal Facebook page or my personal Facebook profile. And overnight, people had e-transferred over $4,000 into the account. And that's what I'm saying. When it comes to the need, it's out there. And so if there's ever a woman who's watching this, and just ask a resource and it will come through for you. It will come through to you. Don't ever let finances be the reason that you stay in an abusive situation. So I think from all levels of government, there's a lot of introspective work that needs to be done, making sure we know who's making those policies, who's making those laws, who is implementing them, how they're being implemented. From the top down, we need to fix it all. The government has tried to make many strides, but if you don't have follow through, nothing will happen. You can give a lot of money and a lot of grant money, but there's no follow through and there's no long-term plan. It's all going to be money that hasn't actually made a difference.
Yeah, you're making a really good point, because governments think in 4 to 5 year cycles, right? Election cycles, and they don't think long term, which is problematic for a lot of women. And the housing situation is horrendous all over in terms of women having access to housing for themselves and their children. And the government has also, as you mentioned, childcare. The government for years has been talking about a national childcare strategy, and we're still waiting for it, right? So there are a number of, and again, prosecution. That's really major within the criminal justice system. And the fact that the lack of resources keeps women stuck and they shouldn't have to be in that position. So thank you for that. I'd like if you can, Zena, talk about the actual situation when it comes to housing and childcare, because I think when we're talking about the shelter system and women accessing shelters and at different levels of shelters and being able to leave the shelter and be independent, give us a picture of what that looks like for women.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very, very hard for a single woman. Imagine how much harder it is when you have 3, 5, 6 kids. Not only do you have to find a way to sustain yourself with a job, but if you're at work and some of your kids are at school and you have kids who are too young to be at school, how do you provide for them? Usually the women are working precarious jobs. And so they're actually making less than what childcare would cost. And so for them, they sit there and they think, I'm going to be away from my children for 8 hours a day, and I'm going to be paying more than what I'm making to someone to take care of my children. For them, it's just, and I've seen their faces, like I've worked frontline as well. And when this has been explained to them, like when they see the costs out there, their faces drop. Like they have so much hope that yes, okay, it takes so long for us to find an affordable apartment for them to move into. And as a transitional home, our goal is always after they leave us, our caseworkers help them find something affordable for them for long term. So we already know that's very hard. Everything is so unaffordable. Rents have gone through the roof, and it's very difficult to find anything. But on the off chance that we do, and those are very, very happy days, I always say out of 365 days, we have 5 good days. 5 days we're very, very happy because something great has happened for the client. But then when you go and you look at childcare, that completely destroys them all over again. And they say, how are we ever going to make it work? You look at child tax benefit, it's not enough. You look at, even Ontario Works or ODSP, it's not enough for a family to live even decently. No one's asking for a lavish lifestyle, but, eating 3 meals a day, being able to clothe your children and yourself, and being able to get around even through public transit, it's so unaffordable. And the government has done little to none to fix that and help that. And it's so hard continuing to work on these cases with these residents and clients when they know what the future looks like for them. What is that, and then sometimes we find subsidized childcare, and that's a big win for us. And then sometimes we find volunteers in the community who say, I run a Montessori or I run a daycare, and I will give 7 spots to residents of the Children's Sakina homes, so that these moms don't have to, pay, and they can get back on their own feet. And if they one day get to a point where they can afford it, then that's fine. Otherwise, it's subsidized or it's free. So I think these kind of things are very important. But as members of the community and as citizens, we rely on one another. But the government is missing. The government is missing from the table. And this is a table they need to be at. The people, the people who are running this country are not at the tables they should be at. They're at the wrong tables. They're spending their time in the wrong places and not in the places that need immediate attention. And I think that's the sad part of this. When it comes to housing and when it comes to childcare, the government on all levels has failed. They have failed every member of the community, and it's going to take them a very long time to come back from this, but they have to start at some point. They have to start somewhere at some point, and they haven't started enough yet.
Yeah, thank you for that. Nicolette, you've worked with a number of homeless communities. What are your thoughts on how women can sort of rebuild their lives, the challenges, the obstacles when they're trying to build their lives after fleeing a violent situation?
Just based off of the work that I've done, I've noticed that a lot of the resources that are available, a lot of women don't feel safe or don't feel welcomed. And I think that is kind of what we were talking about in one of the other questions, just making them not only culturally welcoming, but feeling safe and feeling that they can have their family there or bring their children there if they have to, and not having a safe place to go to, on top of that, not having other resources is one of the biggest challenges. And I agree with Zena when she talks about childcare and talks about the cost of rent just going up and up, especially in Ottawa. It's skyrocketed within the last 2 years. It's not feasible. It's not feasible for mothers, for women, for families at all. And to combat that, like I said, I think in consulting local organizations like Zena's and other organizations that are really helping women and helping racialized families, the government will learn a lot and about how to address these issues. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have one question in the Q&A for you, Zena, talking about maybe, I think they want to know a little bit more about your organization, how you work with other shelters, whether you own an apartment or in a house, sort of maybe give us a visual of what your organization, both in Ottawa, because I know the one in Ottawa is fairly new, and across the country, what they look like.
Sure. So Sakina Homes, we have 4 transitional homes currently, one in Brampton, Ontario, one in Toronto, one in Ottawa, and our newest one in London. So what we offer there is holistic services from top to bottom, whatever they need. And like I said before, if they need something and we haven't offered it, we'll find a way to provide it. A lot of our services that we provide now weren't provided 3 years ago. And based off feedback of a need, we implemented them. So anything from, we have free counseling, not only for those who live in our transitional homes, but anywhere across Canada. We have casework, again, remotely and in-house. We have life skills. That can be anything from learning how to use public transit to what does a credit card bill look like and how do you read it? How do you apply for a credit card? How do you get a cell phone? How do you, when you go to Walmart, some of these women have been here for years and have never been inside of a Walmart. When you go to Walmart, like when you shop and you go to the belt to pay, how do you do that? So it can be different for every case. So what we do is we have these homes, and they're homes in a normal street. The address is confidential. We have security systems in place as well. And women and their kids move in, and they have caseworkers, there's a house manager, there's counselors, and they, until the day that they are able to stand on their own feet, we support them. Until they're ready to go, and until we know that they have an affordable place to live and income to sustain themselves long term, we will keep them and keep trying with them to get them to that place. We also work alongside other shelters and making sure that we share our knowledge of cultural and religious sensitivity for any clients they may have. And if they think a client that they have is a better fit for us, then they'll refer them to us and we'll have that resident move in, and vice versa as well. If we find that, we have a resident that would really benefit from the resources and the knowledge that caseworkers at a certain shelter have, we'll connect them. And then if they want to move there, they're open to that. They want to stay and work with them, that's fine as well. Our goal is to just make the space comfortable. We opened because there was a lack of services that were religiously and culturally sensitive. So for us, it's important that we keep ourselves brushed up on that knowledge. It's important for us that we keep our doors open and our ears open to learning on how we can improve as well, because we never want to end up in a position where a woman is uncomfortable in Sakina Homes, or regrets coming, or is missing something vital to her standing back on her own feet.
And I have another question. How has Sakina Homes been impacted by COVID-19?
So I was actually just talking to somebody about this today. So last year, end of March, beginning of April, when we were kind of just realizing the impact of COVID-19, our call volume went up 700%. And for our small team, that was a lot for us to handle. Every call we picked up, we were missing a few calls. So we brought on relief caseworkers. We opened 2 new homes last year. We opened another one this year. So we had a huge growth that we didn't project for another 5 to 6 years. But the need was so high and so consistent that we realized that it was financially feasible for us to run our programs like this. So our team grew from a team of 4 to a team of 13. And for us, that meant that we were able to help that many more people. Last year was the year that we helped the most people throughout our existence. We've been around for about 4 years now. And last year we helped over 1,500 women and children. with our direct programs, and indirect programs another 2,000. So for us, like that was, we were working around the clock. I think I was usually getting about 4 to 5 hours a night, but that's because we were in the crux of it at that time. We didn't know if our funding was going to last us all the way through. We didn't know what other issues were going to pop up with COVID-19, because it kind of changed. It went from, I'm trapped in this house now 24/7 and I can't leave, and my abuser feels like they have a blank check to do whatever they want, to we've been in this situation for so long now, like we need mental health support. Like that is, so we saw a change in like the demand of services as well. It went from that immediate safety planning to we now need mental health help, because this has taken a huge toll on us. So I think definitely, and I think we're still seeing it change. Now the biggest thing that we're looking at along with mental health and that immediate need is housing. The housing market has, completely like I said, we sent a lot of our pressure onto you guys. Your rents have risen because people from the GTA, from Toronto, are moving to Ottawa, because they're like, you can get a bigger house, a bigger backyard, and probably a little bit cleaner air to breathe. And so we're coming to Ottawa. It's cheaper for them to do that than to stay here in Mississauga, Brampton, Toronto. And so now you guys have seen that influx as well. Not only that, you go to Belleville, you go to Napanee, you go to these towns that nobody really lived in, right? Except for the people who farmed that land or fished there. And you have all these professionals coming because they're like, well, we have a waterfront home, we have 5 acres, and like this is how we're gonna work from home now. So I mean, we've seen that pressure kind of try to be pushed off of one area onto another. And I think it's going to get worse as time goes by. And unfortunately, I think there's going to be a lot of other issues that we can't even think of right now, that are going to pop up, that we're going to have to deal with as they come.
Yeah, and there's a lot of uncertainty in the future. Yeah. Nicolette, how about you? How has the work that you've been doing with moms and women been affected by COVID-19?
Well, honestly, with my organization, Colors of Mama, we've had to adjust a lot. I think, we can't do any in-person events, but a lot of our work is just highlighting important women in our community and making their resources available to other women. So for instance, like our next event is about finances, things like that. So just a lot of switching over to virtual events and things like that. I think with COVID-19 and everyone being home, a lot of moms especially are looking for that outlet to connect and communicate. And like I said earlier, having these connections is really important, and creating a support system, a safe space, and holding space for each other and each other's struggle. At Colors of Mama, we don't just support one group of racialized women. We support all racialized women, all moms, and their families. And yeah, I think it's just creating that support has been extremely important with COVID. I can speak for myself. I'm home 24/7 with my partner and with our son, and it's definitely not easy when you're stuck inside with 2 people or 3 people, 4 people all the time. So being able to have that outlet has been important, and I've definitely seen an increase in the demand and just more women joining our community, which has been great.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. And I think what you're both alluding to too, because COVID has sort of kept us inside with our families. The issue of mental health is very high on the radar for women. Racialized women and their families.
Sorry to interrupt you.
If you want to add something.
I just wanted to highlight that there are a lot of women in our community that are doing some work to help with mental health during COVID. There are some Black women, like Megan Wells in Ottawa. She's working with the Catholic School Board, doing mindfulness training for teachers so that they can help their students manage stress and things like that. So there are organizations that are and women that are doing great work to help throughout COVID and all the mental health, the new mental health battles that we are facing.
That's really good to hear, because increasingly I'm seeing research coming out that's saying that COVID is having a disproportionate impact on racialized communities when it comes to mental health. So it's really nice to hear that you're meeting that need. Well, we've come to the end of our question and answers, and I'd just like to thank our panelists, Zena, Nicolette, and Reverend Cheryle, for taking the time out of your busy days. I know you're all busy on the front lines doing amazing work with women affected by gender-based violence. And I really want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to share your thoughts and your expertise with us. I think we really do appreciate that. Unfortunately, we didn't also get to hear from Wesley. I know Wesley from Toronto days, but maybe there'll be another opportunity for him to participate in an upcoming panel discussion. So I just want to thank you very much for your contributions. And just before I give my closing remarks, I just want to let you know that the panelists are thanking the audience, the attendees are thanking the panelists for their insight and expertise. Keep the conversation going. We've talked about the conversation and the importance of keeping it going. One comment says that the tonight's session was amazing. A couple amazings out there. And they want, another one is very great conversation. Thank you. And they're thanking you. So the panelists, the attendees also are thanking you for your insights and your contribution to this evening's discussion. And also, if you want to get in contact with them directly, oh, there it is on the screen. The email address is info@mamawatali.org. Mama Watali, all lowercase, all one word. And then their address, if you can't see it, is P.O. Box 53124, Rideau Center. So feel free to connect with them if you want to join them in the work or you want to share your expertise. And finally, I want to also thank a special thanks to the Government of Canada through the Employment and Social Development Canada funding administered by the Canadian Red Cross. And I'd like to, again, thank all the panelists for taking the time to participate with us today, and have a good rest of your evening. And last word, as I always remember, is when you're doing this work, it's very difficult. So make a time for yourselves. Self-care is very, very important. Thank you. Bye.